You know, I'd been with an old clothing brand for 10 years, but when I left that, I had to make this work. There was no plan B. And I think that sometimes works because that means you'll do 14-hour days, you'll sit up till 3 a.m. There isn't another plan. If this can't fail, I won't let it fail.
I spoke with a couple of weeks ago. She's a fashion tech consultant, Saskia Fairfull. She teaches fashion, I think just more the concepts and theories of fashion at Torrens University. And the conversation we had was largely revolved around circular fashion and about how there's, the different areas within the whole process in the industry, how we can look at making them more sustainable.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, from what I heard from some people, that the organic cotton thing, like some American dudes trademarked organic cotton. Okay. So it has to be certified by them, so the Americans can control they control trade with the US dollar.
Yeah.
So the Chinese were growing all this organic cotton and but it's not certified organic cotton. It's like, yeah, but it is. It's organic. And like, no, but, just so an American, and then he can come in and go, well, I've taken out the worldwide trademarks, so for it to be certified, you've got to go through me. But he'll want to preference, US cotton growers, everything. So they could put huge tariffs on the Chinese stuff and everything.
Right. Okay.
They love a bit of a trade restriction.
They do. And a bit of a they make up the rules. They make up the rules as they go. Yeah. That's the same with, I think, organic produce. There's that certification. You need to get it. I mean, you don't need to get it authorised. You don't need to get that stamp to claim that you are organic.
Probably more. I mean, if you're going through small channels like selling at a farmer's market, no one's going to give a fuck. But if you want to go to Coles and Woolworths and claim, in the big chains that your products
then
at that point, then you need to go through the proper accreditation.
Yeah. So that was one of the things. I guess like looking at the production side of it. That's a big one, and
I don't have a huge knowledge of expertise there, to be honest. It's something that's starting to happen. It's probably more packaging at the moment.
Yeah.
I think because there's so much packaging around, comes in boxes from China, comes poly-bagged each garment, and then, online shipment satchels, which is coming huge. We pack them into more satchels, like for a garment to get to the end thing. But if you think about it, it kind of has to be packed properly because no one wants to take a garment out and it's like, oh, it's dirty, it's dusty or anything.
Yeah.
Look at this, it's a white hoodie,
Yeah.
If a garment's soiled, it's rubbish. Whereas stuff like if you're selling candles, they're all in glass things. Each one has to be individually packaged and wrapped. And
it'll be packaged just the once from the factory, and it'll end up in the hands of the consumer that way. Whereas I guess like with what you guys do, it'll be various types of packaging. I mean, sure, the garments are already in the bags that they're in, but all the different forms of, I guess, the packaging just to protect it, the packaging just to be able to move it from here to there, and just to keep its form. Yeah, as consumers, don't really consider how much wastage goes into everything that's not the product itself.
I think I've read a statistic before, like 90% of what humans produce is actually packaging. Everything that comes out, how many forms of packaging it's got to go before it ends to the end consumer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, oh my God. It's pretty bad, man. I guess like that's the thing. Like without any consideration, if we don't think about it, then we'll just do it. Yeah, to the point where it just becomes a bit of an issue. But with that conversation with Saskia, a big part was looking at how a lot of companies are implementing more sustainable type practices. And I know in that episode with Maloney, you guys were talking about how with Homey, how they just reclaim a lot of the garments. I guess like almost as break them all down and then repackage them up. Upcycling their particular...
Yes, that's been probably a trend for a while now with people sort of taking old vintage garments and, applying new treatments or cut and sew pieces made from them.
Yeah, and I just wonder whether or not a process like that, or not so much that, but just trying to give garments more life, how much that will influence the style and the design of things, wanting to try to create something that is more, I guess, timeless. You know, that fashion isn't so much about just trying to look a particular way, which is either what's on trend or even the antithesis, or doing something that is not on trend intentionally, but then going and having more timeless type garments where specific cuts will just transcend trends.
Everything comes back around, though. It's that cycle that we also have. I mean, you only have a look at Smith Street, Brunswick Street, Chapel Street now, even how much vintage stores are sort of taking, how much real estate on those streets. And it's almost like Chapel Street. The major brands and boutiques are going out and the vintage stores are rolling in.
Yeah, that's true, man. Like Chapel Street is... I was just there the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and it's been years, and that's like a ghost town now, man. That used to be...
It's sad, but that's high street stores everywhere, St Kilda, where we're based.
So it's just how... The sign of the times, like, what do you think? It's probably not going to be one thing that's going to be the cause of that. What do you reckon contributes to something like that?
Oh, we've got one of the greatest concentrations of shopping malls here in Australia. I think per capita, I think the highest amount. So, people in suburbs don't come as much to the city like they used to. To Chapel Street, you had to go to shop for fashion, or Brunswick Street. Now, I suppose most of the brands you can shop either online from the comfort of your home, which is probably one of the big drivers, but also... you go to any shopping centre, you can basically pick up the same brands.
You've been in clothes and fashion for forever.
Long time,
right? And I know that when you started off, you were working on, you had your brand Death by Zero, but that wasn't a style that was necessarily aligned with you.
Oh, we had brands even before that, Mickey 6, GSE, And originally Death by Zero was something very passionate about, but it was probably as it went on and the beast took on a life of its own, And it's also, I suppose, when you're designing for wholesale, there's a bit of direction and drives given by stores, or it becomes a little bit what they want and where they see it going.
And that was also at a time where that fashion wasn't so much, it was more determined by, it was really top heavy, right? As in there was less dispersion with smaller brands and smaller labels. It was just like there were fewer labels and fewer brands that we were exposed to as a culture. So then, there's a lot less options involved, and then you will have like those department stores and those retailers that will have a bit more sway and a bit more influence into what
the retailer was the gatekeeper. It was, you went to a store to find out what was the new brand, because if you go 30 years ago, that's pre-social media or anything, So you're looking at either street press magazines or going into your boutique to sort of source, all right, what's the new brand, what's the new trend, or seeing it just out and about, literally guerrilla style,
Yeah, and even at the time, man, it was really hard to find things that were not in store, as in not in the department stores, because I know that there'll be times when, like, your options were shopping at Myer or heading out towards the more the inner city suburbs around, like, your Perans, your South Yarras, your Brunswicks, and just try to scour the networks there to try to find brands that were smaller, and as a way of trying to identify or distinguish yourself from everything else. When you started, you were in that era. So talk to me about how you've gone from that time of having less influence on the styles to now with WNDRR, where you just create what it is that you want to create, when you have that freedom.
I don't know even if I had always 100% had that freedom. I mean, the brands I've worked for predominantly have been built a lot around wholesale. So selling to the retailer, so there's a lot of issues with that where you're working 9 months, sometimes more, 9 to 12 months out from the end delivery date. You're probably you're really forecasting a long way out. As the journey's gone on, it's probably an online, either if you've got your own retail, you can be very fast and reactive and design very much for what's happening then and there and be quicker to in-store. But as long as it's been the wholesale sort of path, it has been probably more longer shot. And I think you're still always trying to turn the wheel, spin the axis a little bit of something or what's happening, but you still can't flip it too far, because you always have to go past a retailer who is the gatekeeper of the brands and what's being sold in the store. And if something comes in that's completely different, they want a product that they're familiar with, that they've sort of seen before and they know works for them. So they're always looking for that slight update of something that's happened before, but never something completely different. But my experience, sometimes it's completely out of the left field, can absolutely take off and fly.
Do you think that there was always a desire for us to want to have more varied options with what we wore? Or do you think that the fact that now with social media and the way that we communicate and the options that are available to us, that we're now like, you know what, we do have more options, I want to try to explore that. Which came first?
It's a two-pronged thing, I suppose. There is tribalism, that people see something and you want to fit in with the tribe, or, I think pre-social media, and it's like if you saw every dude had, in the 90s it might have been cross-colour jeans, in the noughties it might have been G-star jeans, these sort of trends, like I need to have a pair of these are what the cool dudes are wearing. But that being said, fashion, it always loves a newcomer, it always loves a new kid on the block as well, because sometimes when everyone's going left, there's always people that will go, I want to go right. If everyone's wearing that, well, I want to wear something. If everyone's wearing baggy, I'm going to wear skinny. If everyone's gone skinny, I'm going to go baggy, to not fit in with the crowd.
That's the thing, man. Like, a lot of our culture, and fashion is such a big part of it, a lot of our culture is determined by people that are counterculture, right? So, like, whatever it is on trend, there's always going to be people that are going to be reactive to that and do the opposite of what that is.
And then the mainstream catches up with the counterculture, then the counterculture go where?
So I feel as though that, like, that relationship is evolving quicker and quicker. It used to move in these particular cycles, and I'm sure, like, you'll be able to see how it is very cyclical still, that the fashion, like, like skinny jeans and loose fit jeans and skinny jeans, but now there's constant tension there, so these evolutions don't fully come around, that they'll come around, but then there'll be more people lingering on the outskirts of that.
We used to see there was probably major trends, and now often there's more micro trends, so there's a lot of things going on. I think when I was younger, I first went to Japan and I was blown away by how many different styles. Like, you go to a main area and there was these real punk dudes and real hip hop dudes, and people really express their individuality through clothing, whereas I found in Australia, if you went to an average bar, you sort of look around and it's like,
it's the same.
A lot of these dudes all just look very much the same, wearing the same sort of clothing,
That was just, lack of options.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether or not it was us having a lack of options and there was a drive or a hunger for us to express our individuality, but we just didn't have those options. Or when those options came, and then we're like, was there a reluctance to want to try something? Because I know that when it came to skinny jeans, that came around in the revolution after I was like wearing Dickies. That was just my staple. And then when skinny jeans came around, I'm like, I don't know. But now Dickies are back, and I've got my Dickies at home. I'm not sure if I can put them back on.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
You're getting too old now.
I feel as though I am.
That's the dad in you talking about today.
I feel as though I am. I feel as though that I'm kind of like stuck now.
Nah, you could rock them. But, 90s revival's been a thing for probably 6-7 years now. Yeah. And I suppose the generation that's growing up, to some of the degree, their parents listen to 90s music, look back at those trends,
That's the thing with Lennox, our son. Like, I'm thinking about the old music that we listened to. When I grew up, my dad would be like Simon Garfunkel and Beatles and Eric Clapton, all that. And then for Lenny, he'd be, I don't know.
Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah, Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Beastie Boys, all that. So that's for him. That's like retro.
Yeah, well, one of the smartest things I think Cotton On did was licensing all that sort of stuff, You go in there and there's Snoop Dogg and TLC T-shirts for 2-year-olds. I think it's genius, because every parent's going to want to dress their kid like that.
Yeah, no, I won't lie, man. I got sucked into that for sure. Yeah, so when you cater for wholesale, they'll have a lot of influence.
Not necessarily, but that if things completely change, it's not gonna be well received. That there's always that element of, we want to see something that's been known before. It's like almost, you could say, a musician, if they've gone punk rock their whole career and then go, all right, I'm releasing a jazz album. The fan base is kind of, okay,
yeah,
what the hell? And for a retailer, that's slowly evolving, tipping the axis a little bit, so slightly shifting something each time, introducing something new, whether that's colours, fits, but drastic changes isn't always sort of taken well, and to a degree, that gets, I think, in a lot of design, it does influence the design process when it's sort of driven by that wholesale aspect.
Yeah, for sure, man, because you
can't be as reactive. It's always got to be waiting for Is this going to be received at the other end?
So how much would you give into wanting to push the limits a little bit?
Well, online's probably changed that, I suppose if you have your own retail space, and that's what people have done for a long time, if they had their own retail, a friend of mine who 20 years ago had denim stores on Chapel Street and Oxford Street and up in Sydney, he'd introduce the new product always through his store, test it in his store, then take it out to the major, so your David Jones, your Myers or major sort of stores across Australia, because then you can actually go out with the data and say, I've put this in my store, just a small drop, it's flown, the customers received it well. Often if you go in and there's something completely different, then it's that hesitation, to try something new. Okay, this is completely different. Is this going to work? Are we safer just putting our money into stuff that we think is,
And then it comes back down to that tension. Like if you have something new in your shelves, how daring or how willing are people going to be to try something new versus just staying with what's already existing? Even if they...
But you've got to take a customer on a journey.
Yeah.
They've got to take them, serving up the same old thing. Again, you can compare it to music. If you release the same sounding album, it might be good for 1 or 2 or 3, but come album 7, everyone's going to, it's just more of the same, bland.
It's tricky though, right? Because you have a lot of musicians and music, and I want to get into this because music and fashion are so closely tied together, probably more so than any other two creative disciplines. But with music, and then, when you have these bands even, how many times do you hear that, you just don't listen to, like you'll say that, I prefer their old stuff.
Yeah.
But they've gone through a process of evolving. They've grown up. They've matured. Their tastes have shifted.
Yeah, provided it doesn't go full Kanye.
Provided they don't absolutely lose this. Yeah, they don't go batshit
Wanderer's going to
crazy.
drop the gospel album soon.
Yeah, imagine that. Right. They've kind of gone through a bit of a growth process as well. So they've gone on this particular journey, and then you've gone on this journey, and at some point you're going to deviate away, and whatever it is, the music they're making is no longer going to resonate with you.
But that's evolution as well. Yeah. And I think that, I've got a saying, sometimes to get a new customer, you have to lose an old one. That someone that drops off and says, I'm not wearing that anymore, I don't like that style. Someone new's going to go, geez, I like that,
And that's what you guys have been doing, right? Like, if for you to have been in the game for, 7-8 years now with
Wanderer, yeah. And they say brands get a 7-year itch. So, the first 1 or 2 years, you're really trying to establish the name of it. By year 3 or 4, if you're doing it right, you should be in the market and it should be out there and people are seeing the brand and starting to resonate with it. And you've started to really find some audience that, is following the journey. But, what I say, year 5, year 6, if you're doing it right, and I've seen the cycles of a lot of brands, that's when you can really hit some commercial mainstream success. And then year 7, a lot of people that might have seen that mainstream success, okay, I'm going to jump onto something else. Or now a lot of guys are wearing it, so I'm going to move on to another brand. I see it out there. And trends change in that time. So, again, if you're in wholesale, we did have some stores that sort of pushed and said, can you do something like, we want this design from 2 years ago. It's like, that's not
yet. Maybe in 20 years.
We've moved on from that. This is it's a new direction. Fits change, weights have changed a lot in the t-shirts and garments over the last few years. That's become a big thing.
I guess would it just be something like, bang for your buck. If you're going to be dropping more coin, you want something just to last longer. You want something just to feel more quality as well. And I think that there's also more people are more inclined to want to hold on to something a bit longer.
Yeah, we're talking about sustainability. Maybe that's part of it. Heavier weight garment's going to wash up and last longer than something lighter weight. Wash a Bond singlet a few times. I mean, they're $7 or something at Coles, but you wash it after 6 months, you got to throw it out.
With Wanderer, and what I was getting at before was like the past experience and the different brands that you've worked with. You spoke about how it wasn't necessarily a style that was fitting for you. You knew that there was going to be there was going to be commercial success there because it was what was on trend, but it wasn't necessarily aligned with with your culture and your upbringing.
Oh, but that was because I was working for someone else as well.
Yeah.
I was brand manager but didn't have the final say, and there was that big influence that just drive it for where what was the most perceived to be the most commercial thing. And at the first, I had a huge amount of love in that. The journey took us all through Europe to fashion weeks, into the biggest department stores in the UK. Bands I grew up like loving. My favourite band as a child, Guns N' Roses. We had Slash's tour manager reach out and say, "You see my T-shirt, Death by Zero One," and he absolutely loves it. Can I get a pack sent over to his hotel? I'm like, cool. Jesus. Later on next day, he's photographed in the Herald Sun coming out of Spearmint Rhino wearing Death by Zero. Oh, that's pretty cool. Would have been cooler if you had taken me to Spearmint Rhino at a party with him. But the Prodigy hit us up, who were, they were huge for me in the 90s, almost converted me from hip-hop into dance,
Yeah, shit, yeah.
Very influential. I've seen them that many times live, and they came to our office and sort of hung out with us.
Jeez.
Liam Howlett, Keith Flint, Maxim took us backstage to a couple of their shows at the Metro, and then later on when they came back 12 months later to Rod Laver.
Yeah.
Keith Flint was awesome, dude. Rest in peace.
Yep.
After the show, he's stripped down naked. He was that sweaty in the change rooms. He's running around spraying everyone with champagne.
Having that approach and seeing that sort of commercial success versus you then jumping into Wanderer, taking over, having more of a creative control over it, and then just deciding that you're going to inject more of yourself into it. Talk to me about like the different approaches from a more commercial brand to something that's more at heart and more of a passion project.
I think it's when you're working for yourself as well, No one's going to show the love for something that you have. It's like your own child, You want to see it success. You want to succeed. You want to see it thrive. You want to see it grow. You want to see it evolve with you, And it's part of your journey. It's part of your story and a way of telling your own story or expressing, who you are. And that changes, obviously, stuff that I would have worn 4 or 5 years ago I might not wear now. And the brand evolves along with your taste and where you see things are at and your interpretation of the times, what you see.
Yeah, and it's come around at a good time as well because you've got a big hip hop influence, and even on the website you talk a lot about taking influence from your not necessarily you, but I guess the culture that it's representing is 90s hip hop street culture, and it's just the timing of it has just worked out so well to have come around now. Right, like in 2023, 24. I mean, sure, you've been going on for a few years, but right now it's in.
Yeah, I don't know if we're perceived as 90. I'd say we're still probably seen as probably now, but I mean, things like this, I suppose, the Chanel patch, and so it's very 90s throw-up lettering style, multicoloured sort of hits. Cargo pants, we're doing that I'm wearing. That goes back to sort of, again, that... But I think there's elements of that, but I think our handwriting and our design is still trying to capture the zeitgeist of what it is at this point in time and put our own interpretation on it. There's a million brands out there and everyone's, the cargo pant's big, everyone's going to do a cargo pant, or the bomber jacket's big, everyone's going to do that. It's everyone, but no one's going to do it like you. You're going to have your own interpretation of that, your own spin, your own,
And like you can see it. You can see how you guys have, you got your fingerprints over the style, and I think that's what separates what you guys do from something like the more what would you even categorize cotton on? What would they? What
just fast fashion?
Just fast fashion, right? Yeah. Like they will be churning through the styles, and in that process, there's no depth to what they're creating. There's no reason for someone to wear it to belong. Price is what I mean, but there's
they do a good job. I mean, that's what all the fast fashion stores are. Here's what the latest trend.
Here's the latest trend for sure.
Yeah, but it's churned out. It's sort of sold as product, but they've had big success. Some of these stores, Cotton On is worldwide and based here out of Geelong.
No, but what I mean is that you guys have there's legitimacy and authenticity in the brand, right? So the brand, it's not even so much about the clothes, right? Like you can look at all the details, right? So there is a particular culture that you represent. The person wearing it resonates deeper with your brand than they would
Oh, but that's brands. Yeah, I suppose that all brand, when you're buying into it, people don't shop in Cotton On for the brand.
No.
You don't go there, or do you ever seen Topless has actually Cotton On across the front of it, you know?
I don't want to be shitting on Cotton On either. We're spending a lot of time shitting on Cotton On.
Might have Nigel Austin on the podcast eventually, who knows?
Yeah, no. We're just, it's just a different discipline. They're approaching.
Think it's an amazing success story. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. For what they've managed to
sing their praises a little bit. No. I'm just trying to create the contrast between how you would operate and how a commercial
it's just
brand.
Different, I suppose. When you're selling a branded product, people need to buy into that brand, so they're buying into that story. What's the ethos of the brand? What's the handwriting of that brand? What's the brand's core fundamental values? And
it takes time. It takes time to be able to establish that and to develop that trust.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's one of those things, and you can't shift it. You can't evolve it too quickly. It's going to be like, as you said, it's just going to be slow evolutions as you grow and you go through your life.
And a little bit of trial and error. Like, I remember our first range, we dropped 10 or 12 different styles, and we managed to get it into about 25 stores nationally, which wasn't too bad, and launched our website, but that was sort of a little bit of an afterthought back then. And some of them sold okay, some of them didn't sell all right. Probably some of them were duds and didn't work at all because people didn't know the brand at all, and so the brand just on a T-shirt meant nothing. But we had this one with a clip art sort of Mickey Mouse hand, and it quoted the Kendrick Lamar "All Right" song on the back, big cartoon lettering, "We gonna be all right," and that just ripped out, flew out of stores. I had stores calling me the following week, "You got more of that?" And so we kept reprinting it. And the moment that happened, I smelled blood. I knew, all right, it's like, I mean, it's a bad analogy, but you throw enough shit to see what sticks, and that instance, like, we've got a winner, and that we can almost launch it off the back of this one T-shirt almost, because something's worked, and that will get into the market. And we sold a lot of that T-shirt, and, that's people started to see the brand, and that's, again, probably a little bit how, the evolution, that's really worked, and that's our customer, and that's something that's resonated with them,
Did you see that coming with that particular print?
No, probably, yes and no, in the sense that if you're just doing logo stuff in a first range, and I see that with a lot of brands that launched, it's like, it's just a regular garment with a logo slapped across it. People don't know that brand in their very first instance. Maybe down the track they do, and that works. But to start off with, it's got to have something, Most of the brands I've worked with have always been built off the back of graphic T-shirts as well. So, a graphic T-shirt has to have a cool graphic, has to tell a story, has to, have something that really resonates with the customer. A logo tee. I always think it's actually harder to sell a logo tee, because it's minimal. Someone is really just buying into that for the brand. They're not looking at that,
Before social media, how would a brand go about telling their story and creating a brand? The groundwork that would be required to establish that would have taken so long.
Pop-up, activation, you do street events, street press, obviously, ads, But and that's why we're living in it's such an exciting time for brands. There's so many kids launching brands now at such a young age and seeing huge success because they're across TikTok, across Instagram. You can tell a story, you can build a narrative. I think it's almost 50% of the branding these days, maybe even more than the design and engineering of the garments. I've seen brands where that's come later down the track. They've sold a story and built something built something on TikTok, which the audience has resonated with, or Instagram for that matter. And I think that's where traditional brands are now finding they have to pivot. That we've always just been in the business of producing clothes and selling clothes to retailers, online store. Now all brands found themselves, hold on, we have to be content creators.
It's definitely always been brand first. I'm trying to figure out, with the way that we consume media now and being so fast paced, and me believing that brand building takes time. It takes time to be able to convey your story how you want it. It takes time for people to start developing that trust in your brand. But at the same time, with all that, TikTok has accelerated all that exponentially. So then, does that mean that there's a heavier churn on brands now? That's whatever is in vogue.
It's too early to see. I mean, that's always happened. I think, was it something like 95% of brands don't make 5 years. So if you tick over that 5-year mark in clothing, then you're in the top 5% of all clothing brands that start. But I mean, I think there's ones that have come up on TikTok from locally here from Melbourne that have done huge things in the space of a year, 2 years, 3 years. I've seen an international because your reach isn't throttled like it is on other platforms. So, you can really reach a global audience there.
And then it just comes down to like everything on the production side. If you were to then just strike it lucky and just like find gold, right? Catch fire very early on. How would you even go about sustaining that? It's probably not even about sustaining at that point, is it? It's just about just capitalizing on that opportunity and then...
there's so many aspects, like when a wholesale... I got to the point, often we looked at the books and there's like, we're owed that much money by stores and you're juggling cash flow. And, you think I got into this because I wanted to design clothing, I wanted to make cool shit to sell to my mates, or I loved the design aspect, or excited about, the process, and all of a sudden you find yourself like, I'm now a bank, and you got to learn, there's so many aspects behind the scenes in learning accounting and inventory management. But again, it's an exciting time. I think that there's so many ways to access that information these days. While, years ago, you're really, really going it alone. I mean, even to go find a contact of manufacturer in China, it's like, where do you start, Yeah. Now you've got websites, Alibaba, you can jump on and search, check reviews, get samples made, produced, that quickly.
Yeah, it's all getting a lot.
You can go to TikTok and find out, how do I go about this, or YouTube, watch a video.
Actually, that's absolutely right. There's so many. When during COVID, it was one of those things. I just went down a rabbit hole of looking at different things to do. And there was all these other sort of not quite drop shipping, but these garment manufacturers that you link up to your Shopify. So you don't even have to have produced anything. You just have to have your online shop front, have your designs. When a purchase gets made, then that one item will then get pressed and packaged, labelled, and then shipped off.
Yeah.
So that's one way of just making sure looking at sustainability, that you're not going to be having to print 500 or thousands of one design of units.
Yeah. And there's a couple of brands I know of here that digital printing, even just having blanks on the shelf. And as you said, every time an order comes through, print that one garment. But there's limitations to that as well.
So how would you go about now? Because you guys have moved into a space that you are a bit more established. You have a follower base. Your brand is somewhat, it's known amongst the people of the subculture that you tapped into, but still largely unknown in a more, on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Is that the space? Is that you're happy being in there? Is that balancing act that you're trying to...
Yeah, because you live and breathe the brand, you always think, everyone knows it. But yeah, I think, we sent out a pack the other day, and the person who has done an unboxing video on Instagram said, I love my new Winter tracksuit. And regularly, you speak to people who've got no idea the brand is. Because you're living and breathing it, you're thinking that it's out there everywhere, but it's really not. I think you're scratching the surface, still at this point in time. But that's probably a good place to be, because I don't see, that we really want to flood the brand. There is, as I said, when everyone's wearing it, that's when backlashes come along, I went to a Chivas Regal event with the G'd Up guys, and they were saying that they consciously, over the last 12 months, pulled back from the Australian market almost tried focusing in the UK, US markets, literally because they knew that backlash was almost ready to come. It's like, all right, we've sold a lot of it, we've had a lot of success, so now with that will become the stigma of it becomes a stereotype, or it's this certain type of guy.
Yeah, and it would be very hard to pare back from there as well. I don't think you really can. It's one of those things that when you just become uber famous, how do you then become
You've still got an audience, and scarcity is one of the big driving factors, in the law of what people want.
So just produce less.
Yeah.
Yeah, just have
supply
less.
and demand.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what all hype brands have really built the model around over the years, is the scarcity. Drop, sell out, don't release.
There's
hype up the next drop, and there's a certain juggling act in that, and even the numbers are right. So if we sold out that time and it took one day, we'll up at this amount of numbers next time, and that might take 2 days, but we'll still sell out, but keep that scarcity.
And then they'll just keep you in that space where you're relevant within the subculture that you play in, but not going to blow up to the point where you will be offending the people in that subculture.
Correct.
There's a crew that make sculptures. It's called Jack of the Dust. And the only way you can purchase their products is if you get onto their mailing list.
Yep.
There's a waiting list to get onto their mailing list.
And now I want to check it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I want it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
My ears prick up.
That's it. So there's a waiting list to get on the mailing list.
Yeah.
And then they drop their items on that mailing list, and you've got to pick it up like that because they go. And if you're not going to be a person that purchases or doesn't open, they'll kick you off that mailing list as well. So with that scarcity, that is a big driver for them. Their products are awesome. And they probably want to also just do it in a way that limits the number of I guess just to make the work manageable for them as well.
Yeah.
They've just found this sweet spot. It's like, this is how much we want to work. We don't want to do any more than this.
But there's value in small batch, in anything.
Yeah, of course. Like,
all products, when if this is a small batch of handmade sauce, chili sauce, it's completely different to buying a bottle of Tabasco, isn't it? Over the shop.
Yeah, and then the quality will potentially. There's a chance that the quality will diminish the more that you're just trying to push out as well. And trying to push out big quantities in a short amount of time.
The sausage factory.
Exactly. Having been established and having been around for 7-8 years, and as you were alluding to, that it takes that 7-year itch, and I think that kind of just ties into not even just with brands, but just everything in general. Your body as an organism, after 7 years, every single cell has been replaced. So you, in 7 years, is going to be a physically a different version.
But don't they say that with kids, you can break that down into 7-year periods. We kind of think as adults in decades, like my 20s or my 30s. But yeah, for younger children, it's like the first 7 years is completely different to the next. And by the next, it's 13, 14, they hit that, then it's puberty. So it's that time from then till 21.
Jeez, if you really think about it.
It does go into these 7-year periods.
Absolutely, man. How old's your daughter?
She just turned 5.
Just turned 5. Yeah. So that those first few years are so critical in establishing just that foundation of them being a human being.
Yeah.
And then by the time they get to 7, because Lennox, my son, just turned 8 yesterday, so he's now in this whole new chapter all the way through till 14. A 14-year-old and a 7-year-old, man, they're vastly different human beings. And then a 21-year-old, vastly different. Yeah,
definitely.
Completely different sort of person.
And that's why I would probably change my outlook. I think, when you're starting out, you see what everyone else is doing, or there's an element that we're competing with this, or someone else comes up and you're worried about this. Oh, no, and we're going to, and people are going to go that way. I think over the last 12 months I've realised you're only really competing with yourself.
Yeah.
That, the old saying is if you're always looking over your shoulder, you're never seeing what's happening right in front of you. Focus on how you can be incrementally better each day, how you can improve what you're doing,
Yeah, man. And I think that if you do that on a personal level, it'll come through in your work as well, right? There's just going to be more confidence in you to be able to execute what it is that you do. And, if you're being honest and being authentic with the work that you're creating, then there's no second guessing. You don't have to try to cater to an audience. Like with your brand, being able to inject yourself into it, it just makes it easier. You don't have to think about what this person is going to want, what that person's going to want. And then over iterations and over the years, And as we were saying that, you go on this particular journey and this, one of your customers is going on that journey, you're going to evolve one way. That's going to come through in your work. They're going to evolve a different way, and they're not going to have they're not going to resonate with the brand in the same way.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
You got to lose a customer sometimes to get a new one.
Yeah, but then in that process of you being able to then just being more authentic in the way that you create your work, it just makes that process so much easier. Right? Like, you don't have to second guess. And you can see that, like with your brand, the iterations, it has evolved and shifted. And I'm going to assume then that's kind of gone on the same linear or the same trajectory as you.
Possibly. Well, I hope not, because I'm a dad now. That everyone's not dressing their dad styles,
like Portman's or
not
Gazman.
Designing for dads.
I wonder though, man, like being a dad now and still trying to cater to the younger audience, I feel so out of touch with what kids are doing these days. I'm not on TikTok. I know that'll be a slippery slope. So I avoid it. So I don't really know what that is like, consuming content like TikTok.
Yeah.
But then having to stay on top of the trends, how are you finding that?
Oh, I don't know. When you've been doing something long enough, you see what's coming around always still. And again, I think it's, injecting your own take on it, that there's a million brands that are going to be doing this thing or that thing. It's all right, but what's your spin? What's your take,
As, there are more opportunities for people to start up a brand these days. And I feel as though that because there are more opportunities and there's less barriers to starting up your own brand, your own fashion brand, that it also means that there's going to be more dropping off. If there's less early success, then there's going to be less motivation to want to continue doing it.
Look, that definitely happened. I think a lot of people have got into the brand space, obviously with passion, loving it, but then found that after 2-3 years, it's got to be something that, can sustain an income. When you're young, you don't have the overheads and the expenses the life factors impacting what you have to do, that it's got to be commercially viable exercise, at some point where people go, well, might as well take a job, And that's the thing, brands can come up and obviously make a fair bit of noise or have some, do some really cool things as well. But eventually at some point the person goes, is this a passion project or is this a career for me?
Yeah, how did you distinguish between the two? Because it is something that you're passionate about, but it's also something that you recognise is...
I went balls deep in. It was that or nothing else.
Yeah.
I didn't have another job. I'd been with an old clothing brand for 10 years, but when I left that, I had some job offers to go to some other clothing brands and work there, and perhaps even within that ecosystem that they had, develop my own brand and sell it under their company umbrella. But nah, I had to make this work. There was no plan B.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes works, because that means you'll do 14-hour days, you'll sit up till 3 a.m. There isn't another plan. If this can't fail, I won't let it fail. And I think, entrepreneur or anyone chasing that sort of dream that, that goes all in and this has to work, the days are long, but the years are short. And you have to just focus. That's long days, and because you can have doubt there, but you keep working towards incremental goal, and you watch the journey unfold, and that's what's happened. I've been lucky enough to experience over the last 7-8 years, but my business partner would probably say there's no luck. It's persistence and planning and execution.
I think persistence is a big one, man. I think it's just that whole showing up consistently, and just being there when shit gets hard, right? And to what I was saying about how, because there's fewer barriers to entry, there's less on the line for people just to bail. Like when shit gets hard, they can just quit because it was a low level investment.
Well, there's worlds full of people that could have.
Yeah. And then that every time you hit a particular hurdle, then you've also got to realise that there are other people that are there with you, up to you if you want to overcome that. Because as soon as you do, a whole bunch of them have just fallen by the wayside. And, you know, like with Wanderer, there's been that evolution, and like there have been the hurdles that have jumped that you've gone over. And you can see that, like, even with your next drop that's coming out soon, that things are starting to tighten up. That like the brand is starting to come into its own, and I guess that'll explain like that 7-8 year cycle is now coming on its own, and it's like developing its own kind of presence rather than taking in too much influence from, or taking in less influence from what's happening around and starting to be the influencer.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, and we've had the graphic designer that works with it, Jake. He's been with us 7.5 years now, so almost 3-4 months into the starting. I think the only range he didn't have a hand in was the very first one. So, again, it's just that handwriting's developed, evolved, and where people might have said in the early stage, "Oh, Wanderer, that might look like this, it might look like this." Well, once you've been developing that handwriting over a 7.5-8 year period, it's like people will just, that look like Wanderer. And there's probably some other brand that might release a design and someone would say, "Oh, that potentially looks like Wanderer."
Looks like Wanderer.
Yeah.
And you've also made it a point to associate yourselves with like the models that you use. They're not models. They're creatives that parlay in the similar disciplines that belong in the same culture, the same subculture as Wanderer.
Well, I just find creatives far more interesting. Plus, I kind of hate modelling agencies, but I shouldn't say that because someone might say it. Okay, his rate just went up. Next time I need to book a model.
Because they will, I guess that, they have a following and they have a brand themselves. So it's almost like leveraging.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's collaboration, Yeah. It's them. And I think no one, if they wouldn't shoot with the brand if they didn't fuck with it. And it's that collaboration process, Again, we had spent, and I think a lot of brands or people have spent time sort of worrying about this person, what that one's doing, this one. The guys at the top aren't worrying about that. They're collaborating and sort of working together. And if you can find a place within that community and, I want to work with you. You got a single coming out, or I fuck with what you're doing in the photography space, or, what you're doing in a creative field, then it's a collaborative process. And anything these days, shoots are becoming more and more complex. It's not just, all right, cool, go stand in front of a wall. It's like, how can we create something different? How can we create something exciting? Video content's obviously adding a whole nother element to that that whole process. Now video's becoming even just as exciting or even more. Yeah. A recent shoot we did, we shut down for a sports jersey collection. We shut down Lakeside Stadium at Albert Park, and had guy Brad Hurl from Diverse AV. He rigged up lighting all around the field. It was incredible, just to see that sort of execution with Braden Films. To just call up the stadium boss and tell him switch off the lights, black out the whole stadium, then bang, spotlights running everywhere.
What was the motivation behind that? Because that was a capsule that you guys had dropped that was just sort of out of left field. And
yeah, I mean, but again, I suppose all streetwear brands worldwide are all doing sports jerseys. That's been a big thing, and it probably will continue this year. You got the Euro Cup, you've got Paris Olympics, so that's going to run on. But I just. Again, I suppose if everyone's doing a sports jersey, we're doing a sports jersey like every other streetwear brand, but how can we make a statement of it? How can we do something really cool,
Yeah.
I'd seen campaigns and people are out standing in front of an old BMW, in jorts and a soccer jersey, and like, okay, let's make something a bit exciting and live with the authenticity of the actual, the game itself, the beautiful game,
And then moving along, where do you see Wanderer in the next couple of years?
Oh, look, we're probably making a pivot more, on our own online channels, making that a bigger part of sort of the journey. So I suppose engaging with our consumer and customer more on the one-to-one level there. New Zealand's probably really started to take hold for us, where that's been a slow burn. And a lot of these things were probably bubbling up pre-COVID. And COVID sort of put it like everything went on hold for a couple of years, and then came out of COVID and it was like life didn't snap back to how it was 2019, you know, all of a sudden, like travel and things like that. So we'd actually started working with an agency in Los Angeles pre-COVID, you know, started putting on a New Zealand agent, but I mean, definitely New Zealand, expanding a fair bit more there, and then just saying, yeah, where else in the world our customer is, our consumer, our guy or girl. You know, we've started to see more and more as we focused online, you know, in the last 7 days, Italy, Netherlands, USA, UK, you know, getting orders from there.
At one point, was it pre-COVID when you started to move into a lot of retail spaces like Culture Kings and Foot Locker?
Foot Locker was post-COVID, but Culture Kings was definitely before, yeah.
Yeah, pre-COVID. Yeah. So then since then, you know, like at that point, around about the COVID era, that there was, you guys were growing and moving more into retail spaces. Is it something that you're paring back on now and wanting to take more control with your distribution?
I don't know, it was a conscious thing from us. Yeah, the retail space has just changed. The landscape's evolved. Like for a lot of those major stores, we started off in very much a boutique space when we launched. You don't get in, historically, you don't generally, unless you've got a huge marketing spend or something, get into major chains from the first range. They want to sort of see the brand come up and see that there's a demand and something in the market for it. So, yeah, we launched in a very sort of boutique space, around 25 boutiques back in 2016 it was. And they're always watching. They're always seeing what's happening, what you're doing. So and the other thing is, you don't generally go to them and get the brand in. When they want something, they'll come to you.
Yeah.
And that's what sort of happened over the years. So, you know, I did approach Culture Kings, I think, from the first range, but the answer was firmly, no one, we don't need it. No one's heard of it. The brand doesn't exist. Theoretically, at that point in time, because we hadn't even delivered the first range, so who knows if we would have come up with the stock. But, you know, but years down the track, then suddenly they came back and was like, okay, we're seeing you out there. We're seeing it, you know. And that was the same with, you know, some of the other ones like Universal Store, Glue Store, Neverland. I think with just about Edge, just about all them sort of bigger chains that we got into at some point in time, they came to us and said, okay, we're seeing, and Foot Locker eventually.
But now you're kind of just paring that back and just trying to push out more online?
I think all brands are saying that online is only going to grow and grow, you know. The forecast, I think, again, something like about 30 by 2030, something 25% of all money that gets spent in Australia is going to be online.
Dude, I thought that because I used to work for quite a few years with an online retailer, and that was around about the time when I thought that brick and mortar was toast. I thought that was gone, and retail stores were going to effectively be showrooms for you to go and look at shit just to buy it online. Where that was, I didn't think, like, I know that people still enjoy a shopping experience, right?
Oh, definitely. And there's a place for brick and mortar retail.
There is. Buying something online once upon a time was significantly cheaper. So I kind of thought that online retail is just cooked. It's just toast. Like, why would we want to go and have that experience if we can just buy something?
But a shoe's something that's so easy because everyone knows their size.
It is,
you almost don't need to try on a shoe if you go by.
There are variables, all right? Like, it's like I wear a medium, but then a medium in this brand is different to a medium
exactly.
in that brand.
So every brand's different, whereas you got a US 11, a US 11, or, you know.
Oh, man, like, I wish it was that way. Yeah, more or less it is, but then sometimes, like, you know, half size here or there. So, yeah, so I thought that, like, retail would just be a space that you would go into to look at stuff and then scan a code and buy it online. I thought that was as far as it would go. Somehow it manages to rein things in where now it's probably more prevalent than it has been in the last 10 years. Would that be right? Like, I would think that there are more people retail shopping in store as much as online. I mean, online has definitely picked up, but I feel as though that brick and mortar has picked up as well in the last 10 years.
Oh, hard to say. I mean, I don't think so.
No?
No. I think
has that got to do with
online's taking a huge chunk out of the pie, and you see that down high streets, you know, Smith Street along here. That, you know, there's still Chapel Street stores are closing.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, because, you know, that people still want, like, they love that shopping experience, and And a lot of that is just, that there is also a brand experience, right? So, your brand is not even just them wearing the
We
clothes.
can tell the story, where, as we said, in an online space, you're only able to do that through social media channels and everything. But there's nothing like walking into a store and actually seeing, you can much more tell this story, the aesthetic and the look and how you want the stock to be displayed, how you want it to be merchandised, which gets lost in an online space.
Yeah. So how would you then make it up? You can't really make it up. Then you just have to find a different way.
I suppose, flagship stores. But if you've got a flagship store, there's not space for that in every corner of Melbourne.
That'll be hard.
Might be one or two go-tos.
Those flagship stores, and that'll be more of a branding experience, right? Yeah. Like that's not even there to make.
And
money.
The ones that are doing it well, they're making that. It has to be an experience to go. You've got to have that reason. I think big part of you saying price. I think price used to be a big thing with online shopping, that people went, I'll get it online for cheaper, but it's not necessarily that much difference now. I think people shop more for a little bit for convenience in online, or they're getting something that they can't find, elsewhere.
And it's not easy to get.
So there's plenty of brands that don't even have a wholesale network these days that are doing huge numbers. You can walk down just about any street in Melbourne and see brands that you spot everywhere, and they're not sold in one retail store.
No, they're not. They'll just be. I mean, like if they don't have their own store, they'll just be. They'll be warehousing themselves.
Purely in the online space. Yeah. And doing some big things. So again, some of these brands are taking it overseas.
So you guys have what would be the measures that you'll be taking to then create that branding experience that the customers will be missing out on?
I mean, it's really hard. That's why I suppose you have to look at either pop-ups. At some point, we probably will look at doing our own bricks and mortar, but my business partner will have a heart attack. He's what we call a reformed retailer. He was 25 years, but he's just got sober and kicked the habit,
This is working for you. The Wanderer was just it was something that had to happen. It was something that had to work out because you would just put all your eggs
there was
in
no
that
plan
basket.
B.
There was no plan B.
No.
And, you had lost that job that had folded. And I know you mentioned on 3000 that your house was half renovated.
Yeah. There was a building site downstairs. The carpet was ripped up. Everything was ripped out.
And you were just sitting down there and you're like, Jesus, what now? Like, what does that feel like? Like, you're looking back at it now, I'm sure that would have been pretty dire sort of situation.
Yeah, but I've had a lot of those points in time in my life, and I'm thankful for them because it's kind of, you have to go all in and you have to say, all right, this is where I have to turn something around, There's no other option. You have to make it work, They say it's what shapes people, I suppose, in life, isn't it? It's not from the good times. We're not shaped and molded through the good times of our life. It's really the hard things that we've had to experience and the hard things we've had to go through that have really sort of carved out who we are,
Yeah.
And you just remind yourself, nothing's permanent. Everything is temporary. So even in the good times when things are going well, that's not going to stay like that forever. There's always something bad that's going to come around the corner, whether it's intentional or not. We lose people that we love. Something bad can happen. Your house could fucking flood. The roof could cave in. Bad things are always going to happen. Yeah, just have to prepare yourself. But
so in that moment, though, like it's easy to have this mindset now, looking in hindsight. But were you feeling this way about it right at that middle point, just before Wanderer had taken off? Were you able to remind yourself that, this is all right, we got this?
I was excited and shit scared. Like anytime you put yourself out there, I suppose, that you think, all right, number one, I'm so excited because this is my chance to tell my own story and my own brand, but what if it fucking completely tanks? And people have actually seen me have huge success with other brands in the past before, but I didn't own them. I was managing and I took it abroad. So there was that pressure as well. As like, okay, you've come from a pedigree and a background we took the brands, as I said before, over to Berlin, Amsterdam, throughout UK. I thought, what if this is a massive failure? Then that's gonna look terrible. But I think it's a perfect combination of childhood trauma and at some point substance abuse and everything that. I always felt I had to prove something, and that's part of maybe what drives me with having a brand. If I felt unheard, it's like, fuck, I'm going to scream so loud the whole world's going to hear. So just kept pushing. Probably it was a huge moment and relief when we sort of cut through in the first range or two and started getting some momentum. But then, like I said, stuff could be good, and then boom, second year or something is like, okay, maybe this isn't going so well, and maybe, am I going to be able to make an income out of this? Am I going to be able to make a living? Because, a lot of people see a little bit of a brand out there, or some people wearing it, but does that make a viable business? Is it something that can grow?
It's hard because after 7 years, there's been for sure be a lot of those moments, and it's just a matter of them.
Probably in the second or third year, there was one guy who wanted me to come work for him, and I think I knocked the job back, and he was throwing this huge party in Byron Bay and had every influencer there, and it was for Splendour in the Grass. And I was looking online at social media like, I could have been at this fucking house in Byron Bay right now partying and enjoying that life. But, I don't look back with any regret. At that point in time, maybe, and business was tough. We were finding it a little bit hard to get cut through, into the market. But that was always pushing through the wholesale channel, and that's always, you have to get past the gatekeeper. And I just think, it's such an exciting time now, because I think it doesn't have to go that way now. If anything, brands are building themselves off the back of them, their own stories, their own TikToks, their own Instagrams, engaging with their customer. And it's now the stores that are actually, instead of being the gatekeeper, they're now coming to the brands and playing catch up and going, can we get your brand? We want that in our store.
Yeah, actually.
Instead of the other way around, where we were banging on their doors, Greville Street was the mecca for so many years of Melbourne fashion, and you had to get into a boutique on Greville Street, and that you wanted to pick the right one, because you couldn't sell to another guy across the road then, and you might have picked the wrong one, but there was so much of that element, whereas now I think there's such a freedom, It's easier than ever to get things manufactured. It's, and with AI, pretty soon they'll be putting together the tech packs for you from the designs that are done.
Yeah, shit, man. I didn't even really consider the implications of AI when it comes to fashion.
Probably saves some time in the tech packing space. The designer will be happy. But then that could be fraught with problems as well.
For sure. Always. There's always a double-edged sword. Whenever there's going to be some resolution to a problem, it's just going to create a whole new wave of issues that you're going to have to deal with then.
Technology can cause as many problems as it solves.
Yep. And you just got to move with it. You got to move with it. And you guys have as well, and you have as well, personally, that, you came up in a time that was pre-social media when it comes to developing your brand. And
stop reminding me I'm old.
No, and then now moving into a space where you're developing a brand that was right in the thick of it, and having to move along with the times and keeping your finger on the pulse. As that changes, so will your brand. Your brand will have to move along with that.
We're going full circle, as we were saying before. If the child's life is in these first 7-year blocks, we've finished our first, and we're 12 months into our second 7-year block, and I'm really excited about what the future's got.
Any prediction with what you're going to be doing within the next? 7 years is a bit far to predict.
Just building on categories, I think all brands launch around T-shirts and jumpers. The T-shirt and the hoodie is sort of the staple for any Aussie brand, and I think, starting to see, I'm a big jacket guy, evolving into more jackets, bottoms, shorts do well for us, tracksuit pants. So building on categories excites me, because for so many years in the old label, we were really just in that T-shirt space, graphic tees, and that was what I knew. So I get excited over being able to put together outfits. And in the content creation space, that's, it's become such a bigger part of what my job is now, and actually putting together campaigns and styling that. And then just going forward, growing it, being our own, being able to tell our own story and being in control of that and the distribution. I think, as I said, New Zealand started to tick for us, and after that, I think, the world, Chico, and everything in it.
Yeah, dude. No, looking forward to it, man. I think you guys are doing a great job of establishing yourselves, and I have been. It's good to connect with you now, but I've known your brand for a few years, and just seeing the evolution. I had no idea of where it is now until we met up, but I saw where it was years ago, and just to see how it has shifted, it's really grown into its own, man.
Yeah. And, we played around the 5-year anniversary. We did 5 collaborations in 5 weeks. We've got some more lined up in the coming future. So just engaging with that, first and foremost, the Melbourne community, because I think, as I said, it's such an exciting creative city and community we're part of here that, I'm excited to launch some ones we've got in the pipelines.
Awesome. That is going to be dropping soon, the hoodie.
It's available now. New
now.
drop. Going actually live at 4 o'clock today, but by the time this was released,
that will be 3 weeks ago. No, I like it, dude. Yeah. So people can find you on your socials, Steve Kirby, Kirby,
Curbs1,
and Wanderer, WNDRR.
Yeah,
dude. Thanks for the chat, man.
Thanks for having us on. It's been a pleasure. Mate.